The crack of his fist against my face echoed through the Philadelphia courtroom, a sharp sting blooming across my cheek as blood trickled from a half-inch cut. And Michael Hayes, the white cop who killed my daughter, stood over me with a smirk. That cut deeper than his punch. I'm Lena Washington, a 42-year-old black former Army medic, 5 feet 8 inches of grit and grief, and on August 3, 2024, I stood in the City Hall courthouse, 50 feet of marble and oak separating me from the man who'd stolen my 16-year-old Amara's life. The room gasped, a collective inhale from the 30 people packed into the benches, but nobody moved, not the bailiff, not the clerks, not the judge who'd just stepped out. Hayes leaned closer, his breath hot with contempt, and hissed, "Your girl should have known better than to mouth off." My vision blurred, not from the hit but from the rage I'd buried since Amara's last breath. Her voice pleading, "I'm just walking home," caught on a grainy body cam before Hayes silenced her. I didn't fall. My soldier's wounds under fire in Mosul kicked in, and I pivoted, my body coiling like a spring. In one fluid motion, I drove my boot into his chest, sending him sprawling 10 feet back, crashing into a table with a thud that shook the air. The crowd froze, a young man's phone flashed, capturing the moment, and I knew, as my heart pounded like a war drum, that this wasn't just a courtroom anymore. It was a reckoning. I'd walked into that courtroom knowing what I was up against, my hands clutching a canvas tote with Amara's sketchbook, its pages filled with her drawings of Philly skyline, and a 6-inch scarf, stained with her blood from that night on Broad Street. The bailiff, a stocky man named Tom, 50, with a tied slouch, had pointed me to the back row without meeting my eyes, muttering, "That's your spot, ma'am." I'd seen that look before, in hospitals, in barracks, in stores. A glance that said I was out of place, a black woman who didn't belong in the front. I didn't argue. I'd learned in Mosul to pick my battles, to wait for the moment when silence becomes a weapon. I sat, 15 feet from Hayes, who lounged 3 rows ahead, his gray suit crisp, his lawyer, a woman named Claire, 38, whispering strategies. My name tag read Lena Washington, a sloppy error that felt like a slap, erasing me the way they'd erased Amara, calling her suspect in reports. I turned it over, my fingers trembling not from fear but from the memory of Amara's voice, bright and sharp, reciting poems at a youth slam I'd organized in Fairmount Park, 2 miles from here, where 100 kids had cheered her words about freedom. Hayes was a predator in a badge, 45, broad-shouldered, with a face that looked friendly in precinct photos but twisted into something cruel when he thought no one was watching. I'd studied him for 18 months, since February 2023, when he stopped Amara for loitering near Temple University, 1 mile from our home. Her body cam footage, 30 seconds of terror, showed her saying, "I'm just walking home," before he yanked her arm, slammed her against a wall, and left her lifeless. He'd walked away, filed a report claiming resistance, and kept his badge. I'd learned his history, 20 complaints over 12 years, including a 2020 chokehold on a black teen, dismissed as procedural. His smirk today wasn't new. It was the same one he'd worn at his commendation ceremony, pinned with a medal for community safety while Amara's blood dried on that scarf. His inner world, I imagined, was a fortress of entitlement, built on years of untitleability. A man who saw black kids as threats to control, not lives to protect. He'd taunted me in the hallway before the hearing, saying, "Your daughter was trouble, just like you," and I'd swallowed the urge to lunge then, knowing the courtroom was my battlefield. The judge, Margaret Cole, 62, with silver hair and a voice like steel, wasn't there when Hayes swung. The room felt rigged, tilted toward him, his lawyer's pen scratching notes, clerks nodding at him like he was family. I noticed the details, the rustle of papers, Tom's radio crackling, a juror's cough. Then I saw it, carved into the desk. "You are seen." It was tiny, an inch long, but it hit me like a lifeline, a message from someone who'd sat here, invisible but defiant. I touched it, my fingers tracing the grooves, and thought of Amara's last poem, scribbled in her sketchbook. "My voice is a river. You can't dam it." She'd been fearless, a girl who'd organized a 50-person art installation in Love Park, 1 block away, painting murals of Philly's forgotten kids. I'd helped her carry the paint cans, 5 gallons each, laughing as she splattered blue on my shoes. Now, that laughter was a ghost, and I was here, carrying her truth. Hayes's punch wasn't just an attack. It was a dare, a test to see if I'd break. My cheek throbbed, blood dripping onto my blouse, but I didn't wipe it. I let it stay, a badge of what they'd done to my daughter. When I kicked him, it wasn't rigid, was precision, honed in war zones where hesitation cost lives. The table splintered under his weight, and his groan was a small victory, but not enough. The young man with the phone, Jamal, 25, a local blogger, typed furiously, his eyes wide with awe and fear. I saw his thoughts in his trembling hands. He wanted to expose this, but he knew the risk, a black kid filming a cop's downfall. Claire, Hayes's lawyer, stood frozen, her mind racing, I could tell, weighing how to spin this to save her client. She was sharp, ambitious, but her loyalty to Hayes was faltering, her face paling as she realized the courtroom wasn't his anymore. Tom the bailiff shifted, his hand on his radio, torn between duty and the shame of standing by. I didn't need their reactions. I needed them to see Amara, to say her name right. The video spread like wildfire. Hashtag Seal Strikes Back trending with 1.5 million views in 15 minutes. Jamal's caption read, "She didn't break, she fought. I didn't check my phone, didn't want the noise." I pulled out Amara's scarf, laid it on the desk, its bloodstained, a silent scream. Judge Cole stormed in, gavel slamming, shouting, "Mr. Hayes, this is a court, not a street fight." But it was a fight, one I'd been waging since I held Amara's cold hand in the morgue. Hayes, struggling to his feet, muttered, "She's just like her kid, all drama." His voice was venom, but it shook, his fortress cracking. He wasn't just a cop, he was a man who thrived on fear, who'd built a career on breaking black bodies, believing the system would shield him. I saw it in his eyes, panic, not remorse. A predator cornered for the first time. I thought of the poetry slam we'd held after Amara's death. 200 kids packing a community center in North Philly, 3 miles away, reciting verses about loss and hope. A girl, Tasha 16, had read Amara's poem, her voice trembling but strong, and I'd felt my daughter's spirit in the room, unbroken. I'd started that slam to keep her voice alive, raising $8,000 for a youth art fund. Now, in this courtroom, I was doing the same, not for applause but for truth. Claire tried to object, claiming provocation, but her voice wavered, her confidence shaken by the scarf's weight. Tom whispered to another bailiff, "Why didn't we stop him?" And I wanted to say, "Because you never do," but I stayed silent, letting Amara's scarf speak, letting the room feel her absence. A juror, a woman named Diane, 45, a nurse, stared at the scarf, her hands clasped tight. I saw her thoughts. She was a mother, imagining her own daughter, in Amara's place, her heart breaking at the system's betrayal. The prosecutor, a man named Eric, 35, held up Amara's photo, not the cleaned-up version but mine, blood on her cheek, a 1-inch gash above her eye. The screen flickered and her face filled the room, eyes wide, pleading, forever paused. I spoke, my voice steady but raw. "That's Amara Washington, my daughter, not a suspect." Hayes scoffed, but the room didn't laugh. Eric's hands shook, his belief in justice tested by the photo's truth. Diane's eyes welled up, her resolve hardening. Jamal kept filming, his courage growing with every share. The drama wasn't in the kick, it was in the silence that followed. The weight of a mother's love against a system that had looked away too long. I didn't need their sympathy. I needed them to remember Amara, to carry her name like I carried her scarf, a wound that would never let them forget. I stood outside the Philadelphia City Hall courthouse, the August sun heavy on my shoulders, my fingers tracing the frayed edges of Amara's scarf. Its bloodstain, a silent vow that I'd never let her name fade. It was 2 days after Michael Hayes' fist split my cheek, after my kick sent him sprawling 10 feet across the courtroom floor, and the world was still buzzing with the video Jamal had posted. Now at 3 million views, hashtag Seal Strikes Back, a firestorm across every screen from Philly to Phoenix. But I wasn't here for hashtags or headlines. I was here to dig up the truth about Hayes, the cop who'd killed my daughter Amara, 16, on a cold February night in 2023, and the system that had shielded him for years. My Army medic training had taught me to find the wound beneath the skin, to stitch what was broken before it bled out. But this wound racism woven into badges and paperwork was deeper than any I'd faced in Mosul. I clutched a 3-inch thick binder, its pages heavy with redacted reports, emails, and complaints I'd gathered with Sarah Nguyen, a 35-year-old detective who'd risked her badge to help me. Amara's death wasn't just a tragedy. It was a symptom of a rot that had festered for decades, and I was determined to expose it. Not for revenge, but for the kids still walking Philly's streets, still carrying dreams like my daughter's. Sarah met me that morning at a coffee shop on Market Street, 1 mile from the courthouse, her hands shaking as she handed me a USB drive, her dark eyes darting like she expected internal affairs to storm in. She was Vietnamese American, a single mom with a 10-year-old son, and her voice cracked when she said, "I saw Amara's file, Lena. I couldn't sleep knowing my boy could be next." Her courage wasn't loud. It wasn't the way she'd snuck into the precinct's archives, pulling 20 complaints against Hayes spanning 12 years, each one buried like a body under bureaucratic dirt. One report, from 2020, detailed a chokehold on a black teen, 15, left with a 2-inch bruise on his neck, dismissed as procedural compliance. Another, from 2019, described a man, 22, found dead in a holding cell after Hayes' arrest, the cause listed as undetermined trauma. Sarah's mind was a storm of guilt and resolve. She'd signed off on minor cases herself, believing the system was just flawed, until Amara's file showed her it was rotten. I saw her fear, not just for her job but for her son, who loved drawing like Amara did, and I knew her fight was as personal as mine. Hayes wasn't just a bad cop, he was a machine of cruelty, 45, with a square jaw and a swagger that said he owned every room he entered. I'd learned his history through Sarah's files and whispers from his ex-partner, David, 40, a wiry man who'd once shared a patrol car with him. David met me in secret at a diner off Girard Avenue, 3 miles north, his hands fidgeting with a napkin as he admitted. Hayes loved the power. Lena, he'd laugh after cuffing kids, saying they needed to learn respect. David's loyalty to Hayes was fraying, his eyes haunted by the memory of a 14-year-old black boy tackled for looking suspicious in 2021. His wrist broken, no charges filed. David had stayed silent then, believing Hayes was tough but fair. But now, facing me, he saw Amara's face in every kid he'd failed. Hayes's inner world was a fortress of control, built on a belief that black neighborhoods were battlegrounds, and he was the general. Untouchable because his precinct stats showed crime reduction, never mind the 200% spike in juvenile arrests. Kids like Amara tagged for attitude and held overnight. I carried that binder to a community center in North Philly, 2 miles from the courthouse, where we unveiled a mural for Amara. At the Essex 15-foot canvas of her face, her eyes bright with the promise of her poems. The event drew 150 people, mothers, teens, artists, each holding a paintbrush or a candle. Their voices blending in a chant, "Say her name." I stood before them, my voice steady but my heart breaking, and read Amara's last poem, scribbled in her sketchbook. "My city breathes, but not for me." The crowd wept, and I felt their grief. Mirror mine, a collective wound we refused to let scar over. Tasha, the 16-year-old who'd read at Amara's poetry slam, organized the mural. Her hands stained with paint as she whispered, "Amara taught me to speak up." Her courage was raw. A girl who'd lost her best friend but found her voice. Her thoughts a mix of fear and defiance, wanting to honor Amara without losing herself to the same streets. I'd started the mural project to keep Amara's art alive, raising $12,000 for a youth art fund. But it was more than that. It was a declaration that we wouldn't let the system erase our kids. Back at the courthouse, I handed the binder to Eric, the prosecutor, a 35-year-old black man whose hands shook as he flipped through it, his eyes narrowing at a 2018 training video Sarah had leaked. In it, Hayes stood before 20 rookie officers, grinning as he demonstrated how to neutralize resistance by slamming a dummy into a car hood, saying, "Hit fast, file clean." Eric's mind was a tangle of duty and rage. He'd joined the DA's office to reform it, but now saw how deep the rot went, his faith in justice cracking like glass. He presented the video in court, the screen flickering as Hayes's voice filled the room, mocking a hypothetical teen who talks back. The jury, including Diane, the 45-year-old nurse, shifted uncomfortably, her thoughts racing to her own daughter, 17, who walked the same streets Amara had. Diane's hands clenched, her empathy turning to resolve. She wasn't just a juror. Now, she was a mother who saw the system's betrayal in every frame. Hayes's history wasn't just a list of complaints. It was a pattern, etched in ink and blood. One file, buried in a 100-page internal review, showed a 2022 incident where Hayes arrested a black girl, 13, for disorderly conduct at a bus stop. Her arm bruised 3 inches wide. No investigation opened. Another, a 2021 email from a lieutenant, praised Hayes for clearing higher-risk zones, meaning black neighborhoods like West Philly, where arrests for minor infractions, jaywalking, loitering jumped 150%. I imagined Hayes's mind, a cold calculus where every black kid was a threat to be subdued, his badge a shield he thought unbreakable. But Sarah's USB drive held more, a memo never sent, from a retired sergeant who'd warned about Hayes's excessive force in 2019, only to be reassigned. Sarah's risk in sharing it wasn't just professional, it was personal, a mother betting her safety for a truth she couldn't bury. I took the fight beyond the courtroom, launching a digital archive project with Jamal, the blogger who turned his viral post into a platform. We set up a 12 by 8-foot projection screen in the Free Library of Philadelphia, 1 mile away, displaying Hayes's redacted reports alongside Amara's drawings, her sketches of Philly's bridges glowing next to the cold text of subject non-compliant. Over 200 people came to the unveiling, their phones lighting up as they shared the images. Hashtag Amara Lives trending with 2 million views by nightfall. Jamal, his confidence growing, spoke to the crowd, his voice steady. "This isn't just Lena's fight, it's ours." His thoughts were a mix of pride and pressure. A young man who'd grown up dodging cops, now amplifying a mother's grief to a nation. I felt Amara in that moment, her art speaking louder than any report, her dreams refusing to be filed away. David Hayes' ex-partner called me late that night, his voice low, almost broken. I didn't stop him. "Lena, I thought he was just doing his job." His guilt was heavy. A man who'd once laughed at Hayes' jokes, now seeing the blood they'd hidden. I didn't forgive him, but I listened, knowing his confession was a crack in the system's wall. I thought of Amara's last night, walking home from a poetry workshop, her backpack heavy with sketchbooks, her heart light with ideas. I'd been in Mosul when she was 10, stitching soldiers' wounds while she learned to draw alone, and the guilt of those years apart gnawed at me, a pain sharper than Hayes' punch. But her pride in me, Her letters calling me supermedic mom kept me standing. I'd started a 50-person vigil at her school, raising $10,000 for a coding scholarship in her name. And now, with the binder and the archive I was building, something bigger, a mirror for the system to face its own rot. In court, Eric held up one of Amara's drawings, a DSX dossier-inch sketch of the Schuylkill River, her signature bold in the corner. "This is who Amara Washington was," he said, his voice breaking. "Not a statistic, a daughter." The jury leaned forward, Diane's eyes wet but fierce, her thoughts a vow to fight for justice. Hayes sat still, his smirk gone, his mind, I imagined, scrambling to rebuild his fortress. But the room wasn't his anymore. The binder's pages, projected on the screen, showed a 2017 complaint. Hayes had punched a black man, 25, for resisting, leaving a 2-inch gash, no charges filed. The truth was bleeding out, and I felt it, not as victory but as weight, the kind that comes when you know the fight is just beginning. I thought of the mural unveiling where a boy, 14, had painted Amara's name in gold, saying, "She's my hero." His words burned in me, not as comfort but as a charge to keep going, to make sure no other mother held a bloodied scarf instead of her child. The courtroom adjourned, but I didn't leave. I stood, Amara's sketchbook in my hands, her voice, in my heart, whispering, "My city breathes," and I swore it would breathe for her, no matter how deep I had to cut to find the truth. The air in Philadelphia felt electric, charged with the weight of a truth that refused to stay buried, as I stood on the steps of the Free Library, 1 mile from City Hall, watching 300 people gather under a gray August sky in 2024, their phones glowing with a video of my kick sending Michael Hayes sprawling across the courtroom floor. I'm Lena Washington, a 42-year-old black former Army medic, and the world was now screaming Amara's name, my daughter, 16, killed by Hayes, a white cop whose badge had shielded his cruelty until my boot cracked his armor. The clip, posted by Jamal, a 25-year-old blogger, hit 3 million views by noon on August 5th. Hashtag Seal Strikes Back blazing across Twitter, TikTok and Instagram, a firestorm that turned my grief into a national mirror. I didn't want the spotlight, didn't crave the likes, but I felt Amara's spirit in every share. Her voice once silenced on a Broad Street sidewalk now, echoing from Philly to DC, 140 miles away. My hands clutched her sketchbook, its pages filled with drawings of bridges and dreams. As I faced a crowd that wasn't just watching but waking up, their eyes reflecting my own pain and resolve. I'd spent years stitching wounds in Mosul, but this wound racism's grip on my city needed more than sutures. It needed a reckoning, and I was ready to lead it. Not with fists but with the truth of my daughter's life. Jamal stood beside me, his phone still in hand, his voice steady. As he addressed the crowd, "This is for Amara, for all of us." He was a lanky kid with a fire in his eyes, a blogger who'd grown up dodging cops in North Philly. His thoughts a mix of pride and pressure, knowing one video had turned him into a voice for a movement. He'd launched a digital petition alongside the clip, demanding a federal review of Hayes' precinct, and it hit 500,000 signatures in 24 hours. His courage wasn't just in posting the video, it was in staying, facing death threats from Hayes' supporters, his heart racing but his resolve ironclad. I saw myself in him, the same stubborn will that kept me standing after Amara's death, when I'd organized a poetry slam to keep her words alive. Now we'd planned a new event, a silent flash mob in Rittenhouse Square, 2 miles away, where 200 people would stand still for 16 minutes, one for each year of Amara's life, holding signs with her drawings. The idea came from Tasha, the 16-year-old poet who'd painted Amara's mural. Her mind a storm of grief and defiance, wanting to honor her friend in a way that would stop the city in its tracks. She stood with us now, her hands shaking as she handed out sketches, whispering Amara would have loved this. The flash mob unfolded at dusk, 200 bodies frozen in the square, their silence louder than any protest chant. A woman named Carla, 35, a teacher who'd taught Amara in 9th grade, held a sign with Amara's poem, "My city breathes, but not for me." Carla's thoughts were heavy with guilt. She'd praised Amara's talent but never thought to check on her safety walking home, a failure that now fueled her activism. She'd joined the flash mob to atone, her eyes wet as she stood shoulder to shoulder with strangers, their stillness a rebuke to a system that moved too fast to bury black kids. I stood at the center, holding Amara's scarf, its bloodstained, faded but unyielding, and felt the crowd's pulse, their grief and anger blending with mine. A drone flown by Jamal's friend captured it from 100 feet above, the video spreading to 4 million views by midnight. Hashtag Amara Lives trending alongside. Hashtag Seal Strikes Back. I didn't watch it. I didn't need to. I felt Amara in the quiet, her spirit in every sign, every face that refused to look away. Hayes, meanwhile, was unraveling, his fortress of entitlement crumbling under the weight of exposure. I imagined his mind, a dark maze where he still believed the system would save him, but his smirk was gone, replaced by a twitch of panic. He'd been suspended, his badge locked in evidence, but he wasn't silent. From his hospital bed 5 miles away in Penn Presbyterian, He posted a video on a burner account, his voice slurred but venomous. She attacked me first. They're making me the villain. It backfired. Deleted in an hour after 200,000 downvotes. His arrogance now a public wound. His ex-partner, David 40, called me again, his voice cracking as he admitted. Hayes thought he was untouchable. Lena, he'd brag about teaching lessons to kids like Amara. David's guilt was a live wire, his thoughts torn between loyalty to a broken brotherhood and the truth he couldn't unsee. He'd started leaking more files to Sarah, the whistleblower detective. Each one a nail in Hayes' coffin, but also in his own conscience. A man who'd once laughed at Hayes' cruelty now drowning in regret. Sarah Nguyen, the detective who'd risked everything, met me at a community center in Germantown 4 miles north, where we launched a citywide letter campaign. Over 1,000 Philadelphians wrote to Congress, demanding a federal probe into the precinct's cover-ups, each letter sealed with a copy of Amara's sketch of City Hall, her lines sharp and hopeful. Sarah's hands trembled as she sorted them, her thoughts a battle between fear for her son's future and pride in fighting for Amara's. I couldn't let another kid end up like her, she said, her voice low but fierce. She'd faced demotion threats, her captain calling her disloyal, but she kept going, driven by the memory of Amara's file. Buried under lies, the campaign wasn't just letters. It was a lifeline, connecting mothers, teens, and veterans who'd never met but shared my pain. One letter, from a 17-year-old named Malik, a coder inspired by Amara. Read, I'm building an app to track police stops. Because of her. Malik's mind was a spark, his ambition to code a safer Philly tempered by fear of being stopped. Himself, his hands typing late into the night to honor a girl he'd never met. The nation was watching now, not just Philly. NBC ran a headline, Medic Mothers Fight Justice or Retribution, while CNN aired a segment with Carla who spoke through tears. Amara was my student, we failed her. The media frenzy reached D.C. 140 miles away, where a congressional hearing was called, a 100-seat chamber packed with suits and cameras. Senator Elaine Carter, 50, a black woman with a voice like tempered steel, led the charge. Her thoughts a mix of duty and personal pain. Her own nephew had been profiled in Baltimore, 90 miles away. She showed Amara's video, 45 seconds of her pleading, I'm just walking home, before Hayes' hands ended her life. The room fell silent, not a cough, not a rustle, as Elaine asked, why was this girl's name erased from the record? Her question wasn't just for the panel, it was for the country, a challenge to face its complicity. I watched the hearing, on a library TV, 1 mile from the courthouse, my heart heavy but proud, knowing Amara's voice had reached the Capitol. Hayes' mind, I imagined, was a storm of denial and rage. He'd built his career on fear, targeting black kids like Amara, believing his badge was a crown. A leaked audio, uncovered by Sarah, surfaced online, a 2022 recording of Hayes laughing after a stop, saying, these kids need to learn who's boss. It hit 5 million plays in 12 hours. His voice a blade that cut through his defender's silence. His lawyer, Claire, 38, was crumbling too, her thoughts a tangle of ambition and doubt. She'd taken Hayes' case for clout, but now, facing the viral truth, she questioned her choice, her eyes avoiding mine in court. Diane, the juror, wrote in her journal, shared later on a blog, I see my daughter in Amara, I can't unsee it. Her resolve was steel, a mother ready to judge not just Hayes but the system that let him thrive. I organized a rally at Love Park, 1 block from City Hall, where 1,200 people gathered, holding Amara's sketches, their voices chanting her name. I read a letter I'd written to her, my voice breaking, you are my heart, Amara, I'm fighting for you. The crowd's energy was a pulse, their grief and hope a mirror of my own. Malik, the coder, stood beside me, showing me his app, Prototype, a 200-line code to map safe routes, his eyes bright with purpose. Tasha led a chant, her voice soaring, while Carla handed out flyers for a youth art fund, now at $20,000. The rally wasn't just a protest, it was a promise, a city refusing to forget. I felt Amara in every shout, every sign, her dreams alive in the hands of those who carried them. Hayes was losing, not just in court but in the streets, his name now a synonym for rot. I didn't celebrate. I stood, Amara's scarf in my pocket, knowing this was no victory, just a step toward a world where no mother would hold a bloody cloth instead of her child. I stood in the shadow of a 20 by 30-foot community garden in North Philadelphia, 3 miles from City Hall. My hands sunk into the soil where marigolds bloomed in Amara's name, each petal a quiet defiance against the system that had tried to erase her. It was February 2025, 6 months after Michael Hayes' fist split my cheek in that courtroom, and the world had changed, not enough to bring my daughter back, but enough to carve her name into history. I'm Lena Washington, a 42-year black former Army medic, 5 feet 8 inches of grief and grit, and I'd fought not for revenge but for a truth that could save the next kid walking home. The Carter Act, named for my Amara, had passed in Congress, a law mandating body cams for 4,000 police departments across the U.S., with a 3-year felony for tampering. its weight etched on a 15 by 10-inch steel plaque in DC's capital, 140 miles away. I didn't attend the signing, didn't want the cameras or the handshakes. Instead, I was here, planting seeds with 200 volunteers, their hands dirty but their hearts full, each flower a promise that Amara's light would outlast the darkness. Hayes had cast. My fingers clutched her scarf. Its bloodstained now, a faint rust, and I felt her with me, her voice whispering through the wind. My city breathes, urging me to keep building, keep fighting, keep remembering. The garden was my idea, born in the sleepless nights after the viral video of my kick sent Hayes sprawling. When #Seal Strikes Back hit 4 million views and Amara's face became a national cry, I'd wanted a space where Philly's kids could grow something other than fear. A 1-acre plot where 1,000 plants, marigolds, roses, sunflowers, stood for lives lost to badges like Hayes' Tachar. The 16-year-old poet who'd painted a mural helped organize it, her eyes bright with purpose but heavy with loss. She knelt beside me, planting a 12-inch marigold, her thoughts a tangle of hope and pain. She'd lost her best friend but found a voice, whispering Amara would have drawn these flowers. Tasha's defiance was quiet, a girl who'd turned grief into art, now turning it into roots. I saw her strength, the same fire Amara had when she'd sketched Philly's bridges, dreaming of a city that didn't break its kids. We'd raised $25,000 for the garden through a citywide art walk, a new event where 500 Philadelphians walked 2 miles from Love Park to the garden, carrying Amara's drawings, their footsteps a rhythm of remembrance. The walk wasn't just a fundraiser, it was a vow, a community saying, "We won't forget." Hayes was fading, his name no longer a shield but a scar. From his hospital bed 5 miles away he'd tried to salvage his image, posting another video, claiming he was misunderstood, but it sank under 300,000 downvotes, his voice a hollow echo of the arrogance that once defined him. I imagined his mind, a collapsing fortress, grasping at the lie that the system would save him. He'd been a predator, 45, with a swagger that thrived on fear, targeting black kids like Amara, believing his 20 complaints chokeholds, broken wrists, a 2019 death would stay buried. But the Carter Act had changed the rules, forcing body cams to stay on, exposing men like him to the light. His ex-partner David Forty had turned fully against him, leaking a 2023 memo where Hayes bragged about cleaning West Philly, his words dripping with contempt for the kids he arrested. David's thoughts were a storm of shame. He'd once admired Hayes, but now saw him as a stain, his own silence a betrayal he couldn't unlearn. He called me, voice low, saying, "I'm sorry, Lena, I should have spoken up sooner." I didn't absolve him, but I listened, knowing his confession was another crack in the system's wall. The Carter Act's implementation was relentless, a tidal wave of accountability. In 200 training centers across the U.S., 75,000 officers watched Amara's video, 45 seconds of her pleading, "I'm just walking home," before Hayes' hands ended her life. The room always fell silent. No coughs, no notes, just the weight of her voice. An instructor, Officer Ramirez, 38, a Latino father of 2, led one session in Philly, his hands trembling as he played the clip. His thoughts were a battle. Pride in his badge clashed with shame at its misuse. His own kids, faces flashing in his mind, making him question every stop he'd ever made. He ended each session with my words, printed in the training manual, "You're not invisible, you're unforgettable." Ramirez's resolve hardened. He'd started mentoring young officers, vowing to root out the rot Hayes represented. I met him at the garden where he volunteered, planting a 10-inch rose, saying, "This is for my daughter so she doesn't fear my uniform." His words hit me, a reminder that change wasn't just laws but hearts, one seed at a time. I'd launched a mentorship program alongside the garden, pairing 500 Philly teens with artists and coders to carry Amara's dreams forward. Malik, the 17-year-old coder who'd built an app to track police stops, was our star, his hands flying over a laptop at the community center, 3 miles from City Hall. His mind was a spark, driven by Amara's memory but haunted by the fear of being stopped himself. His app now at 300 lines of code, downloaded 10,000 times. He told me, "Amara is my why. Miss Lena, I'm coding for her." His ambition was fierce, but his eyes held the weight of a city where safety wasn't guaranteed. I mentored him myself, teaching him to channel fear into focus, the way I'd learned in Mosul, stitching wounds under fire. The program wasn't just about skills, it was about giving kids like Malik a shield, a way to fight without fists. We'd raised $15,000 through the art walk, funding laptops and art supplies, each teen's project a tribute to Amara's creativity. The congressional hearing in D.C. had set the stage for the Carter Act, but its real impact was in rooms like the one where Senator Elaine Carter, 50, stood before 100 lawmakers, her voice cracking as she held up Amara's sketch. "This is who we failed," she said, her thoughts a mix of duty and pain. Her nephew's profiling in Baltimore, a wound that drove her fight. Elaine's resolve was steel, but her heart ached, a black woman who'd climbed the system's ranks, only to see its cracks. She pushed for the axe passage, ensuring its 3-year felony clause was ironclad, a law that would have saved Amara if it had existed. I didn't watch the vote. I was at Amara's grave, 3 miles from downtown Philly, my hand on the cold marble, whispering, "It's begun, baby." I'd declined the White House's invite to the signing, their gold foil letter offering a front row seat. I didn't need their applause. I needed Amara's name to live, not as a symbol but as a warning to a system that had looked away too long. Hayes's downfall was a quiet erosion. His name stripped from precinct records, his 2019 Commendation Medal now in evidence lockup. I imagined him in his hospital bed, staring at a muted TV as news anchors dissected his fall, his mind raging against irrelevance. He'd tried calling a local station, demanding airtime, but they hung up, his voice no longer commanding. His lawyer, Claire, 38, had stopped defending him publicly. Her thoughts a maze of regret. She'd taken his case for prestige, but now saw the blood on her hands, her career teetering. Diane, the juror, spoke at a community forum, 2 miles away, her voice steady. Amara's face changed me. I can't be silent anymore. Her resolve was a mother's vow, her daughter's safety now, her fight. Her journal entries a call to action shared online, reaching 1 million views. The art walk had ended at the garden, where a 60-year-old gardener, named Marcus, who'd lost his son to police violence in 2015, planted a 12-inch sunflower, his hands steady but his eyes wet. His thoughts were a prayer. He saw his boy in Amara, and the garden was his way to heal. Each plant a step toward peace, he told me. This ground holds our kids, Lena. It's sacred. His words sank into me, a reminder that my fight wasn't mine alone. The garden, the mentorship, the Carter Act, they were roots, growing from Amara's loss, reaching for a city where kids could walk without fear. I stood there, Amara's scarf in my pocket, her sketchbook under my arm, and felt her presence, not as pain but as purpose. The system hadn't changed overnight, but it was cracking, and I'd keep digging, keep planting, until no mother held a bloodied scarf instead of her child. I looked at the marigolds, their golden petals catching the light, and whispered, "For you, Amara," knowing this wasn't the end, just a soil where her legacy would grow. I stood at Amara's grave, 3 miles from Philadelphia City Hall, my fingers brushing the cold marble where her name, Amara Washington, shone under the fading March 2025 sun. Etched beside the words, her voice lives. Michael Hayes, the white cop who'd stolen my 16-year-old daughter's life, had been sentenced to 25 years for homicide, his name erased from every precinct honor roll, his badge locked away like a confession. I'm Lena Washington, a 42-year black former Army medic, 5 feet 8 inches of resolve forged in Mosul's chaos and Philly's heartbreak, and I'd fought not for vengeance but for a truth that could shield the next child. I didn't watch Hayes' sentencing, didn't need to see his face to feel the weight of his fall. Here, at this 12 by 8-inch stone, I felt Amara's presence, her laughter from poetry slams and her sketches of Philly's bridges vivid in my heart. The Carter Act, passed in her name, had reshaped 4,000 police departments with mandatory body cams, a 3-year felony for tampering. Its legacy carved on a 15 by 10-inch plaque in D.C., 140 miles away. I'd declined the White House's gold foil invite to the signing, choosing this quiet grave over their applause. My hands held her bloodstained scarf, its rust-colored mark a testament to her life, not her loss, and I vowed to keep her light burning, not as a symbol but as a promise to a city that could still change. Hayes' conviction wasn't a fireworks display, it was a slow unraveling, his name no longer a shield but a scar. In a federal courtroom, 2 miles from my row house, Judge Margaret Cole, 62, read the charges: homicide, civil rights violations, perjury. Her voice steady but weighted, as if Amara's name carried the room's gravity. Hayes, 45, sat shackled, his swagger crushed, his mind, I imagined, a crumbling fortress of denial and rage, grasping at a system that no longer protected him. He'd built his career on fear, targeting black kids like Amara, believing his 20 complaints a 2019 death, broken wrists would stay buried under paperwork. But the binder I'd compiled with Sarah Nguyen, the whistleblower detective, had ripped that veil apart. Its 3-inch thick pages now public, a map of brutality disguised as community safety. From his prison cell, 100 miles away, Hayes had tried a final plea, a letter claiming he was misjudged, but it drowned under 400,000 online rejections. His voice a fading echo of the arrogance that once defined him. His lawyer, Claire, 38, sat silent during the sentencing. Her thoughts a wreckage of ambition. She'd bet on Hayes' untouchability, only to see her career tarnished, her eyes avoiding the gallery where Diane, the juror, stared with unyielding resolve. Diane, 45, a nurse and mother, had become more than a juror, speaking at a community forum in West Philly, 4 miles away, her voice clear. Amara's face is my daughter's face. Silence isn't an option. Her thoughts were a mother's vow, her 600-word public letter, shared by 2 million online, a call for accountability that shook the city. She'd joined a youth-led mural festival I'd organized in South Philly, 2 miles from City Hall, where 300 students painted a 50 by 20-foot wall with Amara's name and others lost to violence, leaving a blank square for those who hide behind silence. Aisha, a 22-year-old student leading the festival, spoke through a megaphone. Amara's sketches pushed me to study law. Aisha's mind was ablaze, her ambition to reform the system tempered by fear of failing her community, her hands painting Amara's name in gold. The festival raised $30,000 for a legal aid fund, each stroke a refusal to let Philly's kids be forgotten. I stood among them, Amara's sketchbook in my hands, feeling her spirit in their defiance. Their art a louder cry than any courtroom verdict. The system was bending, not with fanfare but with a quiet reckoning. Harold, a 55-year-old clerk, stood by when Hayes punched me, posted a 700-word apology on a city forum. I saw Amara's scarf and did nothing. I'm sorry. His thoughts were a storm of shame. He'd raised 2 kids, believing his silence kept them safe, only to see his complicity in Amara's erasure. His letter, retitled The Cost of Standing Still, became required reading in 50 state agencies, a mirror for those who'd looked away. Brian, a 50-year-old officer who'd trained under Hayes, resigned, leaving his badge with a note, "I can't wear this anymore." His mind was heavy with regret. He'd once admired Hayes' toughness, but Amara's video, played in training, showed him the cost. His resignation, a quiet rebellion. I met him at the community garden, 3 miles away, where he planted a 10-inch sunflower, saying, "This is my apology, Lena." His words landed like a stitch in a wound, not healing but holding it together. I'd launched an annual lecture series at Temple University, 1 mile from where Amara died, named for her, with 200 seats filled by students, activists, and cops. Tasha, the 16-year-old poet, read Amara's poem at the first lecture, "My City Breathes," to a standing ovation. Her thoughts were a blend of pride and pain. She wanted to honor her friend but feared her voice wasn't enough, yet she spoke. Her words, a bridge to Amara's dreams. The series raised $20,000 for youth scholarships, each lecture a call to act. I spoke at the second, holding Amara's sketchbook, my voice steady. "This isn't about me. It's about kids who deserve to walk home." The audience listened, their silence a vow to carry her name. A candlelit walk I'd organized, 1 mile through Fairmount Park, drew 2,000 people, their candles glowing like stars, chanting Amara's name. Maria, a 40-year-old neighbor 2 blocks from me, carried a candle, her thoughts a mother's fear. Her son walked the same streets, her heart racing every time he left. She said, "This is for Amara, for my boy." The walk wasn't just a vigil. It was a promise, a city refusing to let silence bury its children. Hayes' name was no longer spoken with pride. It was a caution, his 2019 commendation medal destroyed. His personnel filed 30 complaints over 12 years, public by court order. In prison, he sat alone, his mind, I imagined, a cage of fury, screaming for irrelevance no one granted. He'd called a news station, begging for airtime, but they disconnected, his voice worthless. I didn't celebrate his fall. I was at home, in my 1,500 square foot row house, hanging Amara's 8 by 10-inch drawing, "I'm Fearless," from her 3rd grade journal, found in a shoebox where she'd hidden crayons. I burned a 6-inch letter from a 10-year-old girl, thanking me for saving her from a cop stop. "I just wanted to be Amara's mum," I whispered, the ashes curling in a rusted tin on my porch, the same one where she'd played as a kid. The flames didn't heal, they burned, a reminder that my fight was for her, not for glory. The city council renamed a park for Amara 2 miles away, but I skipped the ceremony. I didn't need plaques. I needed her name to live in every kid who walked free because of the Carter Act. The system wasn't clean, but it was cracking. In classrooms, Amara's story was a case study, systemic complicity, with her sketch in textbooks, a 2x3, the image of her smile. Malik, the 17-year-old coder, launched his app, now at 20,000 downloads. His thoughts a mix of pride and pressure, coding for Amara while fearing his own streets. Senator Elaine Carter, 50, quoted me in D.C. Lena demanded memory, not justice. Her words, shared by 3 million, were a call to the nation. I was at the garden planting a 12-inch rose with Marcus, the 60-year-old gardener who'd lost his son, his hands steady as he said, "This is our kid's legacy." His peace was mine, a quiet strength that needed no applause. Reflecting on my journey, I see a path carved through grief and fire. I learned that silence is a weapon only when you choose it, not when it's forced. That truth, like a wound, must be opened to heal. And that love for Amara, for Philly's kids, can outlast any badge. I fought not for me but for her voice, her sketches, her fearless heart. The Carter Act, the garden, the murals, they're not justice, they're roots, growing from her loss to a world where kids can breathe. I learned that change starts with one name, spoken loud, and that memory is stronger than pain. Standing at her grave, I whispered, "You're unforgettable, baby," and felt her river flow through me, through Philly, through a nation that finally saw her. If you were in my place, facing racial bias, abuse of power, and a system that turns away, how would you fight? Would you speak, organize, plant seeds, or carry a scarf until the world remembers? The answer lies not in applause but in action, in ensuring no child's name becomes a footnote.